For over 60 years, one question has haunted America. Who killed JFK? We've been promised answers time and time again. Congress passed the JFK Records Act back in 1992, ordering every single document to be released by 2017. Presidents have signed orders promising total transparency, and with each new data dump, we're told we're this close to the truth. Millions of pages have been made public, and they paint a wild picture of Cold War espionage, secret wars, and government surveillance. But they haven't solved the central mystery. Because even now, after all those promises, thousands of the most critical documents are still hidden, blacked out, or delayed by the very agencies at the heart of the story, the CIA and the FBI. The official story hasn't changed an inch. A lone gunman, Lee Harvey Oswald, for reasons we'll never know. But the government's actions tell a different story, a story of continued, relentless secrecy. So the real question isn't what they've shown us. It's what on earth are they still so desperate to protect? Today, we're not just asking. We're showing you the files they are still fighting to keep hidden. It all comes down to a promise versus the reality. The promise from Congress was that every record would be public unless there was a clear and present danger to national security. The reality, a decades-long pattern of obstruction, delays, and what some have called outright deception. In recent years, members of Congress have continued to push for transparency, forming panels and demanding the federal government stop its obstruction, obfuscation, and deception. We're going to break down the 5 categories of secrets that are still being kept under lock and key. These are the files the CIA and FBI have fought for decades to keep from you. The first secret they're hiding centers on 7 days in 1963. Just 2 months before the assassination, Lee Harvey Oswald went to Mexico City. He bounced between the Cuban and Soviet embassies, making calls and holding meetings. The Warren Commission knew about the trip. What they weren't told was the incredible extent of the CIA's surveillance on him there. Newly declassified records confirm the CIA was running a top-secret telephone tapping operation in Mexico City, with the hidden approval of the Mexican president himself. They intercepted Oswald's calls. They knew who he talked to. They had a file on him that was 185 pages long before the assassination. And yet, the CIA hid the existence of this wiretap from the Warren Commission. They concealed their deep, pre-existing knowledge of the man who would be accused of killing the president. Why? Researchers like Jefferson Morley have pointed out that the agency's focus on Oswald was pervasive. They knew about his contacts, his personal life, everything. The official excuse you'll often hear is incompetence, that it would be embarrassing to admit they were watching a guy who went on to kill the president. But the sheer level of deception suggests something more. They didn't just fail to connect the dots, they actively hid the dots from investigators. The unredacted files on the Mexico City operation, the full call transcripts, the informant reports, the internal memos explaining why they didn't act on what they knew, remain one of the biggest missing pieces of the puzzle. The second category of secrets is maybe the most explosive, the files on the CIA's own assets and informants. One name in particular comes up again and again, George Joannides. In the 1960s, Joannides was a CIA case officer running a major anti-Castro Cuban student group, the DRE. This is the very same group that had multiple run-ins with Lee Harvey Oswald in the months before the assassination. They got into public arguments with him, creating a paper trail that painted Oswald as a pro-Castro agitator. Years later, when the House Select Committee on Assassinations reinvestigated the case in the 1970s, the CIA assigned a liaison to help them get the documents they needed. Who did they send? George Joannides. He was put in charge of providing records about his own operation without ever telling the committee that he was a central figure in the events they were investigating. The committee's chief counsel later called it a flat-out breach, labeling Joannides a material witness who was put in place to be a filter. The former head of the Assassination Records Review Board said the CIA deliberately misled them about Joannides' role. To this day, the CIA has refused to release Joannides' personnel file and the full records of his covert operations. They say it's to protect sources and methods, but researchers argue it's the key to understanding the agency's relationship with Oswald before Kennedy's death. It's the smoking gun file, and it remains under lock and key. Secret number 3 drags us into the murky world of organized crime. Everyone knows that 2 days after JFK was killed, Lee Harvey Oswald himself was murdered on live television. The killer was a Dallas nightclub owner named Jack Ruby. The Warren Commission looked into Ruby's mob ties, but decided he acted alone, overcome by a fit of patriotic rage. But the questions have never gone away. Why would a man with deep connections to the criminal underworld risk everything just to silence a patsy? The document releases have given us some tantalizing clues. We have FBI informant reports from just days after the assassination suggesting mob figures might be involved. We have memos about wiretaps on mafia leaders. But the core files, the deep intelligence reports on the intersection between Jack Ruby, the Chicago outfit, New Orleans crime boss Carlos Marcello, and their links to anti-Castro Cubans and CIA operations, are still heavily blacked out or withheld entirely. The justification is often about protecting ongoing law enforcement operations, but 60 years later, that excuse is wearing pretty thin. The files on organized crime aren't just about Ruby. They're about a web of connections that the original investigation failed to untangle, and that government agencies still seem determined to keep shrouded in fog. We're halfway through the secrets the government is still hiding. It's a complicated web of deception that has been spun for decades. If you're finding this breakdown useful and want to see more deep dives into the stories they don't want you to know, take a second to subscribe and hit that notification bell. It really helps us keep these investigations going. Now let's get back to the files. The fourth secret isn't just one file, but a whole category of them that revealed the shocking scope of the CIA's covert operations during the Cold War. The JFK documents have become a backdoor into understanding the secret history of America. While no single document has proven a conspiracy, the cumulative picture they paint is chilling. For example, a 1958 memo exposed a massive, illegal mail opening operation where the CIA indexed the names of 250,000 people sending mail to the Soviet Union. Other files detail bizarre plots to undermine Castro in Cuba, with operatives requesting Magnum pistols but no bullets. The latest releases provide unredacted details on CIA agents working under diplomatic cover in embassies across the globe and their staggering budgets. These files on covert action, election meddling, and domestic spying are often dismissed as being unrelated to the assassination itself, but they are essential context. They show a government agency operating with enormous power, in near total secrecy, and often completely outside the law. They establish what researcher Jefferson Morley calls a fact pattern of deception. The full scope of these programs, especially any that might have intersected with Oswald, the anti-Castro groups, or even JFK's own foreign policy, remain hidden. The agencies argue releasing them would harm foreign relations or expose methods, but 60 years on, it looks more like an attempt to hide a history of institutional failure and spectacular overreach. The final secret is maybe the most important one. It's the system of secrecy itself. The story of the JFK files isn't just about what happened in 1963, it's about what has happened in every year since. The 1992 JFK Records Act was supposed to finally end the secrecy. It established a legal presumption for immediate disclosure. Yet, agencies have repeatedly used presidential deferrals and national security exemptions to delay and obstruct that mandate. Even after presidential orders in 2022 and 2025 mandated the release of files, thousands of documents remain redacted, and the CIA continues to slow-walk its compliance. There are still thousands of documents with redactions. The CIA's excuse is that they must protect the names of living agents, but researchers point out how ridiculous it is to think there are thousands of living agents named in these 60-year-old files. For many, This pattern of resistance is the most compelling evidence that something is wrong. When an agency spends more than half a century fighting to keep records secret, misleading Congress, deceiving review boards, and defying presidential orders, it begs the question, what are they hiding? The secret is no longer just about the assassination. It's about the decades-long cover-up that followed. So, where does that leave us? The millions of pages that have been released tell a story of Cold War paranoia, of a secret war against Cuba, and of an intelligence apparatus that was watching Lee Harvey Oswald long before he ever stepped into the Texas schoolbook depository. But they do not give us a definitive answer. No released file has contained a signed confession or a detailed conspiracy plan. Instead, we are left with what the government won't show us. The full, unredacted file on the CIA's ghost agent, George Joannides. The complete surveillance records from Oswald's trip to Mexico City. The unvarnished intelligence on Jack Ruby's mob connections. The story of the JFK assassination files has become the story of government secrecy itself. Decades of promises have been broken, deadlines have been blown past, and the agencies at the center of it all continue to insist that information from over 60 years ago is still too dangerous for the public to see. The lingering question remains, is it because releasing these final files would endanger national security, or is it because it would endanger the official story? Let us know your theory in the comments below. And if you want to keep digging into the secrets of the past, make sure you're subscribed. Thanks for watching.